Hello, faithful. Welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis. And today we're going to be discussing the 49ers' heartbreaking 20-17 last-second loss to the Seattle Seahawks. We're going to be going over stats, three big reasons why, at least I believe, the 49ers dropped this game. George Kittle being out, Bosa getting injured in the second half, and Nick Sorensen's defense being all sorts of vanilla. We're also going to be talking about Brock and Deebo, the games they had, the running game or somewhat lack thereof. Specifically, where's Jordan Mason? Pass defense wilted on the final drive. We're going to be talking injuries coming out of the game and the end result from dropping a third NFC West game, another game in the NFC. The Niners are a game back of Arizona. Where does the team go from here? Let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. And this was a game that San Francisco needed to have. I don't want to say that it was a must-win game or a had-to-have game, but significant, obviously, when it comes to the NFC West and the NFC playoff picture, especially looking ahead as San Francisco is at Green Bay next week and then at Buffalo the following week. This was a team that Brock has never lost to, a team that in the Niners that Geno Smith, Seattle's quarterback, has never beaten, and a game that we figured going in with the Niners as a 6.5-point favorite, and I took them, my prediction of 27-20 obviously being very wrong, although I did get the Seattle score of 20 correct. Thought this was going to be a game that they could pretty much control, but Seattle flipped the script a little bit in terms of how they played San Francisco defensively, and obviously having someone like Kittle being out did not help matters at all. Let's just get through some housekeeping items in terms of the yards. If you told me before the game the Niners would hold Seattle to 289 total yards, I would have felt really good about the victory. Problem is the Niners gained 12 less yards at 277. Turnovers were tied 1-1. First downs 21-19 in favor of San Francisco. Time of possession, Niners had a 7-minute advantage there. Purdy, not a great game by any means. 159 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Did run it 5 times for 40 yards and a score. McCaffrey, his second game back, 19 for 79 on the ground, 4 for 27 through the air. As a team, they ran it 27 times for 131 yards and 1 touchdown, so a shade below their average on the year. Juwan Jennings paced the receiving game, 10 for 91. Deebo, 4 for 22. Juice for 2 for 12. And Saubert, 1 for 7. Interceptions, Isaac Yiadom had 1. The Niners did generate 4 sacks. We're going to talk about the pass rush more. 1.5 by Bosa, 1.5 by Leonard Floyd, and 1 by Yetur Gross-Matos, returning from a knee injury, missing the last 6+ games. So let's just start with me, and there's going to be more than the 3 main reasons. We're going to get to those after the 3 big ones. But main reason number 1 why the Niners lost this game, George Kittle being out. We heard late in the week, questionable, and I've said before McCaffrey even came back, probably the week or 2 before McCaffrey returned, especially with Ayuk being out for the season, that this offense needs to run through George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. You know that Shanahan is going to force feed McCaffrey. There's going to be no mercy in terms of coming back from the Achilles strains, the Achilles injuries. And 19 carries. It is game 2, 19 carries, 4 receptions, so 23 total touches. But Kittle is the other half of that equation, right? He's the other side of the coin. And the offense struggled mightily today against a Seattle team that did play more man than they played the first game up in Seattle. They were challenging the 49ers receivers. Yes, Jennings had a good game, but think about all those contested throws, contested catches that Jennings made. Kudos to Brock for anticipating Jennings running a curl, coming out of a cut, but Jennings was only wide open on 1 or 2 catches, or wide open by NFL standards. Otherwise, it was being contested quite a bit across the board, much like the interception to McCaffrey. He tried to force one in. Devin Witherspoon on the coverage in the slot. Witherspoon gets a hand in. And of course, for the Niners, the ball just does not get batted to the ground. It gets batted up probably 15, 20 feet in the air and intercepted by one of the defensive linemen for the Seahawks. This is a referendum, a game like this, a situation like this, or a situation like the past 8 years of Kyle Shanahan not being able to develop a number 2 tight end. Since 2017, the closest they came was 2020 when they signed Jordan Reed from the Washington, at that time, Redskins. And Kittle missed a bunch of games due to a foot injury. And Jordan Reed statistically had the best tight end season for the 49ers in Kittle's time there. That was not by George Kittle, and it was by a large margin. Jordan Reed had a very, very good season. By comparison, Eric Saubert, with his 1 reception today, now has 3 receptions on the year through 10 games. When Kittle is out, obviously you lose something in the run game, run defense, the passing game. He's one of the 3 best tight ends in the league, probably still the best all-around tight end in the league, but there is a lot of wear and tear on the body. And we'll see how much longer he's with the Niners. And I still project that he's going to get an extension. And I think Shanahan needs to start using him differently to save the body. I would rather have Kittle for an extra year and have him play more like a like a Travis Kelce does. Maybe you split him out in the slot. He doesn't block as much. Saubert had a pretty decent day. There were no busted assignments on Brock. I think Brock was sacked twice, but Saubert held his own. I know, I don't know how much Jake Tonjes or Braden Willis got in there. I wasn't really paying attention to him. If I was focused on the tight end at all watching this Seattle game, it was how much Eric Saubert was going to contribute. And just one pass that we thought he got a first down on and winds up not. But Shanahan has to figure out, for games like this, it's a game like when Deebo misses. There's a gaping, historically, right? There's a gaping hole in the offense. When McCaffrey misses time, there's a gaping hole in the offense in terms of what maybe McCaffrey can do in the passing game. Not so much the running game. We're going to get there. I don't think this game plan would have been Kittle-centric. It's McCaffrey-centric in Shanahan's mind. And at least for the 4 receptions that he got, he does draw coverage. He does draw eyes, if not coverage, because you saw during the game, Seattle was, as you heard Greg Olsen say, playing an umbrella defense, keeping everything in front of them, which is smart because the Niners do not have any burners to take the top off of defense. And Jacob Cowing, receiver punt returner, got knocked out, whether it was late first half, early second half, and he was only in on a handful of snaps on offense anyway. That's a safe thing to play against San Francisco. Usually you play that against an explosive offense, right? Like the Chiefs when they had Tyreek Hill, the Dolphins now with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and the corpse of Odell Beckham Jr. Keep everything in front of them. Make the quarterback make the right read. Hope your rush gets there. Play them in front of the sticks or a little bit beyond, but rally and tackle, wrap up. Hope that the first person that gets to a receiver can bring somebody down. And Seattle was doing that. Jennings had a big game, but the hole that Kittle provides or leaves, in the offense is massive, because when you're out there, it's not like if Kittle's not playing, that they're not playing with the tight end and they're bringing in Pearsall instead, or Conley. Ronnie Bell mercifully was inactive this game, so we didn't have to deal with that. But it's not like they are going to substitute in a receiver for a tight end, just block with 5, or they actually did bring in Jalen Moore as a 6th lineman on a handful of occasions, but they're not trying to replicate Kittle's offensive production with another position, meaning a wide receiver. So when Saubert's out on the field, or Tonjes or Braden Willis, and it's a pass play, and that tight end is in the pattern, they're essentially playing a man down, right? Saubert's not a factor. Tonjes is a non-factor, 0 catches on the year. Same with Braden Willis. None of them, or even combined, they are not George Kittle. I get that. They're not going to be given the same amount of respect or shading of coverages that someone like George Kittle would get, like Deebo gets, like McCaffrey gets. I understand the step down from Deebo to the other tight ends, to the other receivers, to Kittle, the other tight ends, to McCaffrey, to the other running backs in terms of pass catching out of the backfield. But to not have a viable tight end threat, if Eric Saubert has 5 catches for 65 yards, do they win this game? Probably not. I don't know. It depends on when those catches are actually going to, occur. If it happens in the red zone again, when they're stalling out, keeping drives alive, maybe. But they are playing offensively a man down on pass plays because Kittle is not in. And it's not Kittle's fault that he got hurt or that he missed time, but I think it is Shanahan's fault and the offensive staff, that they cannot develop an adequate. We are not saying 90% of Kittle. I'm not saying 80 or 70% of Kittle. 40 to 50%. If Kittle's going to have a 7 or 8 catch day, 3 or 4 catches, is that a little bit too much to ask? Kittle in, much better chance of winning the game. Maybe they put up 24, 27. Kittle is that much of a factor in the middle of the field for Brock. And just think about how much he would open things up for Deebo, more so for Jennings, for Pearsall, who was non-existent, 2 targets, no catches. Thanks for playing. Kittle out, huge issue for the offense. And I felt it when I heard that Kittle might not play yesterday, or maybe Friday it did not sit well with me. And I was like, well, let's just see. Let's see how much of an X factor McCaffrey is, or Juszczyk, if he's going to be thought of as a pseudo tight end, even though he's a fullback, but someone that can obviously make some plays in the passing game. I did not feel great about that. And whatever worries or fears that I had obviously came to fruition. Bosa getting injured in the third quarter, or in the second half, I guess was it the fourth quarter, end of the third quarter? You guys all saw the stat. 6 points allowed when Bosa was in, 2 straight touchdown drives when Bosa was out. Now, don't misunderstand me. Nick Bosa is not a one-man wrecking crew. And I've made this statement before, and I'm going to stand by it. He is not a game wrecker. He is not a TJ Watt or a Myles Garrett, someone that, Reggie White, Bruce Smith, Lawrence Taylor, he had a great year, 18 plus sacks, defensive player of the year, got a well-deserved contract. He is someone that obviously defenses, O-lines, tight ends, receivers that are going to chip him have to account for. But he is not a one-man wrecking crew, nor would I say he was really a one-man wrecking crew today against Seattle. 1.5 sacks, same number that Leonard Floyd had, and Yetur Gross-Matos had 1. So 4 sacks for a Niner team is actually probably close to a high watermark on the year. I didn't go back and check what their season high was, but I hope, doing the podcast, looking at the stat lines, 1 sack, 2 sacks, 3 sacks. 4 is a pretty good game just in terms of quantity of sacks. But when he's not out there, when he's completely not out there, not just, rotating or maybe it's something that he can play through, the drop off from him to Yetur Gross-Matos is big, to Sam O, significant, to Robert Beal, who got a handful of snaps in the fourth quarter, significant. Because Leonard Floyd's not tremendously pushing the pocket. He's a different rusher. He's more of a speed rusher. Powerful guy, right, at 245, but Bosa's got another 20 pounds on him. Someone like Yetur Gross-Matos has another 20 pounds on Leonard Floyd. If Bosa had played in the fourth quarter, would they have closed the deal on Seattle? I don't know, right? I don't know. If he was in the first touchdown drive, would they have stopped the first touchdown drive? We don't know. Would he have stopped the last drive of the game? We don't know. We can't go back in time. DeLorean time machines do not exist. What we know for certain is 6 points with him on the field, 14 points without. But it wasn't all Bosa being out. It was Sorensen's vanilla defense throughout the game. Listen, 289 yards allowed, good statistically, or yards output allowed for the defense. All right, you tip your cap there to some degree. Fine, they did generate 4 sacks. They got an interception. But watching the game, you heard Greg Olsen say it, 1 blitz all game. This is a team that's in the bottom quarter or bottom fifth of the league in terms of blitz percentage. Their philosophy has not changed since 2019. They're going to rush 4, drop 7 more often than not. And under Nick Sorensen, it's significantly more often than not. D'Amico blitzed more than Sorensen. Saleh blitzed more than Sorensen. Steve Wilks certainly blitzed more than Sorensen and probably wanted to blitz even more than that, but Kyle was asking him to back off. But what these defensive coordinators have in common, at least say the last 3 prior to getting to Sorensen, and they had good runs. Poorly disguised blitzes. This is not a complicated defense that San Francisco runs, and that's by design, right? Right? They're modeling it after the Legion of Boom. Shanahan has come out and said, this cover 3 4-man rush, make the quarterback beat you consistently down the field and hoping that a quarterback's going to make a mistake is what he thinks gives him the most problems. And I would still argue, no, it's not. It's a Jim Schwartz defense. It's a Brian Flores-led defense that gives you problems, and that's pressure. Whether it's because he can't scheme up things against pressure, whether he can't, the receivers aren't going to separate against man because you're generally playing man if you're throwing pressure in front of it. You could obviously play some zone and mix and match behind it, but you're generally going to find somebody on an island. It is not working with how Sorensen's calling a game. I mean, Jesus Christ, you or I could have called that game, right? You give us a little bit of knowledge of what they're playing on the back end, secondary wise. Chris Kosora could help us out with D-line stunts. You're rushing 4, dropping 7 all game. It might have been 2 blitzes. There was, I think, one earlier in the game, and there might have been just one at the end of the game when Seattle was inside the 15. It looked like they were going to bring both linebackers. I think one did blitz and one dropped, but it was another poorly schemed blitz because it left the entire middle of the field open. Smith did get rid of it quickly. I think it was to Jackson, Smith and Jigba for a short gain. But Sorensen has not evolved at all. I feel like he's playing the good soldier with Shanahan, that this is the defense that Shanahan wants to run, and he's doing it to a T, but he's doing it to the most conservative T possible. And let's compound that by the fact that you lose Nick Bosa. And if you want to say, and I was on the podcast last week saying this might be the game where it's okay to rush 4 and drop 7. Because Geno Smith is one of those fringe quarterbacks that may or may not be able to beat you when you're doing that. And Geno Smith was 0-5 going into this game. So the proof is out there that if the Niners play the way they've played in the past, they should be able to force Geno into multiple mistakes. I made the statement of Geno's going to Geno. And it should be good enough to beat the Seahawks. Now, a lot goes into that. You would figure that the offense would score more than 17 points. Didn't see Kittle not playing in the game until Friday or Saturday. I don't think it would have changed my prediction. I would think that the Niners still would have had enough to win. But also, kudos to Mike McDonald in changing up the game plan from their first time out against San Francisco. Again, keeping everything in front. Niners don't have a burner. Niners are missing Kittle. They're missing Ayuk. So they're missing 2 important weapons. And Brock had an okay game. We're going to get into Brock more, but let me just stick with this whole vanilla defense thing. So you lose Bosa and you're still only rushing 4? Wouldn't you think now that you're missing your best pass rusher, a top 3, top 5 defensive end in the league, and you don't send pressure to compensate for that? It's easy to say after the fact, but I've been saying this all season, and I'm sure There are many out there that agree the Niners, by rushing 4 consistently, and that's what they do. It's consistently. You're not asking the O-line to think. The O-line is playing 5-on-4 all game. And as many stunts as you want to throw, if you want to loop a defensive end inside, have a D tackle rush outside, that's all well and good. If you're playing against an O-line that's a zone blocking all O-line, which I don't know or think that Seattle is, it's not going to matter because O-linemen are blocking to an area, not to a person. So you can stun all you want. There's not going to cause that much havoc unless you have, 4 absolute game wreckers on the line, which the Niners don't. The Niners actually don't have any because I don't consider Bosa one. Very excellent player, great player, not a game wrecker. But you're not making the O-line think. You're not asking Geno Smith to make a quick, smart decision. Geno Smith has a very good arm. And if you give 20 to 23 of these quarterbacks in the NFL time in the pocket, more often than not, they're going to find somebody open if you are not getting consistent pressure. 4 sacks aside, you could say, oh, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. 4 sacks and you want them to blitz. Yes, but it's the same old song and dance. They wore down in the second half, right? Even though Floyd got a sack on the last drive, Geno had 1 incompletion on the last drive and obviously then ran 1 in for a touchdown. And you can do that. There's going to be holes in the defense. If a lane opens up or there's an opening in the line based on how you're rushing, the way the Niners are playing zone behind it, you saw it on the instant replay on the run. Defenders have their back to Geno. By the time they understand what's going on, Geno's inside the 5. You're not forcing Geno or other quarterbacks to make quick decisions. You are not forcing the issue. You're not forcing the quick pass in front of the sticks, rally and tackle. It's what we saw Tampa Bay do on the Niners' last couple drives last week. Todd Bowles got very blitz heavy in the fourth quarter. And the whole philosophy is get there or get the quarterback thinking and the O-line, where's it coming from? And the QB knows more than likely, I got to get this out of my hands quickly. And if you're doing that, chances are it's a short throw. The secondary knows it. They're going to give some cushion and then read and react once the ball leaves the quarterback's hand. But the biggest issue with having a vanilla defense is how can a defense like this have a killer instinct if you're not aggressive? I can't see, you can't rationalize to me a defense is able to close out, put their stamp on a game, put their foot on the neck of their opponent if they're not trying to dictate the issue, if they're not trying to be the bully, if they're not trying to force a quick pass, not trying to force routes in front of the stick, get the QB thinking, get the O-line thinking. A team, a defense can't have a killer instinct if you're not holding leads late in games. The offense is giving you a 10-point lead, a 14-point lead, a 17-point lead against Dallas. And the lead wasn't any more than 4 here for San Francisco when they were up 7-3 or when they were up 17-13 against Seattle. So, they weren't up by 10 at any point during this game. And I'm sure all of us were feeling pretty good. Like, there's no dreaded 10-point lead here. Niners, might be able to squeak this one out, but it was another game that was just uncomfortable throughout. And that's what I figured it was going to be. It's going to be like that all game, and it's going to be wildly uncomfortable throughout against teams like Buffalo or Detroit right now that could potentially run it up on them. Josh Allen, the run pass option, unless Jared Goff has a game like he did against the Texans, multiple 4 or 5 interceptions, that game could get maybe a little bit out of control. That's a month plus away. I don't want to get too involved with that, but this game completely felt the same way as the Rams game and the Cardinals game earlier this year. Letting a team that you are better than hang around, not convert, on offense, not keeping some drives alive. Defense is making some plays, but fewer and fewer as the game goes on. Offense played better mathematically in the second half than the first half, right? It was 7-6 at halftime. So they scored 10 points in the second half, only 7 in the first half. Another somewhat slow start for San Francisco. I think they wound up going, 3 and out, or punted on their first drive pretty quickly anyway. But there's there's aggression after the snap. We saw that fracas that developed between Diamador Lenore, Kenneth Walker throwing him into the ground, multiple flags being thrown. It'll get chippy after the whistle. But during the play, not asking for anybody to play out of control, like, Dre Greenlaw, a stupid personal foul for no reason, or hitting somebody 6 yards out of bounds because he's, playing like a wild man. But maybe they do need that spark. But they should be able to find it from someone else that can provide energy or discipline, or have a defensive coordinator calling a game that right now, if the philosophy is, I'm going to rely on my 11 athletes on defense to be better than your 11 athletes on offense, it should be done in a downhill, all gas, no brakes sort of way. And obviously, I know Robert Saleh said that when he was with the Niners, for 3 or 4 years. And then obviously said that with the Jets, and then probably got fired midway through this season. But can you look in the mirror and say this is an aggressive, all gas, no brakes defense? It's aggressive because it's football. It's aggressive because people get hit. A lot of times they get hit hard. A lot of times they get hit by a couple people. But this is not a defense that in any game this season is imposing their will. And the game that they blitzed the most was against the worst offense they faced in the New England Patriots. And I still can't figure that out, because you would figure that's the game where you sit back and say, you can't hurt us offensively. We're going to stay disciplined. We're going to play man. We're going to play zone, whatever we're going to do. But we are not going to let your lack of athletes on offense beat us. And I don't think Sorensen was scared of their 3 wide receivers. Noah Fant at tight end was missing for Seattle. They did hold the Seahawks under 100 yards, rushing. It might have been I think Geno had about 30 on the ground. So it was only about 64 from running backs. Run D played okay, but it was Seattle. You expect anybody's run D to play okay against Seattle because they don't run the ball, or they give up on it too quickly. No creativity in defense. It's like playing Madden and just choosing a 4-3 or a nickel all game with no blitzes. Cover 2 man, cover 3 man, all game, zone, man, mix it up a little bit, but no. And it's maddening. And Shanahan gave Sorensen credit. When you look at the stats, the Niners didn't lose the turnover battle. It was even. They won the time of possession battle. Yards were relatively even. They kept the Seahawks offense, which is averaging over 400 yards a game, under 300. But you can say the same thing about Seattle's defense, holding the Niners offense, number 2 in the league, to about 130 yards under their average. Sorensen had the ability. You always have the ability, if you're a coach, especially when you're calling plays, you have the ability to call certain plays. And the ones that we know he doesn't call involve sending 5 or 6 or more at the quarterback. And he had a chance to end the game, or had a chance to give Geno a different look that last drive, and did not. And I don't, it's the definition of insanity, the whole thing doing the same thing over again, expecting a different result. We've seen the defense wear down. We've seen the pass rush wear down with Bosa. What did we think the pass rush was going to do without Bosa? Consistently. And it's a shame they went down. I can't even say they went down swinging. They went down doing the same stuff that has cost them games throughout this season, and has cost them leads late in the game, cost them leads and points allowed in the fourth quarter. If Geno had thrown a touchdown pass, or they had scored with the Niners being aggressive, I would not have come on this podcast saying, why did they blitz? They held the Seahawks to 13 points without blitz. Not at all. It's not revisionist history with me. I've been consistently beating the drum for use your athletes, use your players, scheme them, put them in the best position to close out a game. And I don't think dropping and reading and reacting is the best way to always close out a game, guys. That's what I'm saying. Sorensen is always, always, always playing the game like this. You would think you would have learned from maybe the Rams game to do something different against Arizona. You would think they might have learned against those two games to do something different against Geno Smith or Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, who was missing a whole lot of players. I can't sit here and say the defense played bad. They didn't. But I think as the game wore on, they made it easier and easier for Geno Smith. And the exclamation point was losing Bosa and still doing the same thing defensively. I think it's unacceptable. I think the way that this season is going for San Francisco, I still don't know how they're going to end up. 10-7, I said, was my ceiling. Is it still possible that they get there? Yeah. Difficult? Yeah, especially with the next two on the schedule. But I can't see a logical scenario where Nick Sorensen is brought back. Someone needs to challenge Kyle a little bit and John Lynch for what they're looking for in a defense and a defensive coordinator. Because again, you can have the principles of this cover three, this rush four stuff they want to do, but there's too many good players on this defense to not trust them outside, to not trust them, on the back end and the safeties, to not trust the linebackers or whatever, but use your chess pieces a little bit differently. And Sorensen has been consistently vanilla throughout the season. Now, other reasons, listen, a lot of blame to go around, right? Like Shanahan and the offense starting slow. You would think that they'd be able to garner more than under 300 yards against this Seahawk defense. But guys, at some point, as much as everyone wants to complain, and already like the Twitter twats, Shanahan should be fired. He's got to go. Terrible, unacceptable loss. I do agree with that last part. Unacceptable loss for sure. Sometimes the Niners can get outplayed. Sometimes it's okay that the other team, the other offense, the other defense has a better game than your respective corresponding unit, right? This isn't the land of milk and honey. This isn't Camelot anymore like it was in the 80s, at least this season, where the Niners are expected to line up and roll over team after team. Everything is going to be difficult. Nothing is going to be easy. It's going to be uncomfortable. And some games, probably the two upcoming, are going to get really uncomfortable, probably really quickly. Brock didn't have a great game. I don't think he was helped out tremendously by Shanahan. Kittle being missed is a huge loss for them, obviously. But Brock did score a running and a passing touchdown, threw an interception, somewhat unlucky the way that the tip went, right? Brock didn't throw an interception that Geno Smith threw. Geno Smith had Jackson Smith and Jigba open on a curl or a comeback, overthrew him by about 10 feet to Isaac Yiadom. Like, that's an interception. And Geno Smith got the win. Good for him. But that's an interception where you go, Jesus Christ, that was a terrible throw. Now, Brock may have forced the throw to McCaffrey, but it was unlucky the way that it ricocheted off of Witherspoon's arm. But he did score passing and running, right? He kept drives alive with his legs. He completed 75% of his passes. At 159 yards, 162 yards, whatever he had. I know wasn't a great statistical output, but Brock was highly efficient. They were moving the ball, but like always, kind of stalling out either red zone or otherwise earlier on in the drive. Deebo being quiet throughout. What was 4 catches? What I say? 4 catches for 22 yards? Yeah. How is he not more of a factor? How is he not more of a factor with Ayuk out for the rest of the year and Kittle being missed this game? I know they tried a couple times with handoffs, not really going anywhere with jet sweeps. Tried a couple times with, quick passes. One was right before the end of the half that he gained a big chunk of his yardage on, of his 22 receiving yards. But how is he not more of a factor? He's not separating. There was, a play with 3 minutes to go in the game after a McCaffrey 1 yard loss on a run. Brock goes play action, throws it high to Deebo. If you go on social media, you're going to see fans crucifying Brock for that kind of throw. Was it a good throw? No. Did he have to get it over the D lineman? Yes. Did he have to get it over the linebacker in front of Deebo? Yes. He put it, I'm not going to say in the only place he couldn't have put it. The throw was somewhat errant, but it's not a terrible throw. Now you have fans attacking Brock Purdy's height. Well, that's a terrible limitation to have, his height and his arm. If he can't, is Brock allowed to miss? He's not a robot. He's not going to throw it perfectly every time. Completed 75% of his passes. And oh, by the way, Geno Smith, facing that 4-man rush for all but one or maybe two, if there were two blitz dropbacks, completed 78% of his passes. So this defense, that granted, they only allowed 20 and 17 points respectively, allowed quarterbacks to be highly efficient. But the Seahawks cashed in on their last two drives as touchdowns, and the 49ers were not able to sustain their what ultimately wound up being the second to last drive of the game, because the last drive was only 12 seconds left on the clock. Brock, if you want to say Brock needed to shoulder more or do more, I'm not going to argue with you. But I will say, folks that are not giving credit to Seattle's defense and Mike McDonald need to, I think, reevaluate that. Because again, this is not a team that's just going to show up and roll through teams game after game. Especially, they were missing Ayuk the first game. They still wound up scoring 36 points, right? They're missing Kittle this game, still Ayuk, Bosa the second half, Deebo being a non-factor, Ricky Pearsall, 0, non-factor, Chris Conley, non-factor. So whatever McDonald in that secondary was doing, sometimes you do have to tip your cap and say, okay, they limited the Niners just as much as the Niners limited Seattle. But Seattle's defense got the stop when they needed to with 3 minutes to go in the game, and the Niners defense did not. And Seattle, I don't recall if they were blitzing on that final drive or not. I think on that last play to last completion to Jennings, they did send some pressure at Purdy. Not to say, well, that might have been a reason why they actually, stopped that drive, because Purdy had to get rid of that out pass to Jennings pretty quickly. And Jennings was trying to fight, through a couple tacklers like he did earlier in the quarter on a third down, fighting, keeping a drive alive, and getting, helping the Niners get in for the go-ahead touchdown to go up 17-13. Lastly, on Brock, is he passing up checkdowns? Maybe. McCaffrey did have 4 receptions. Juice did have 2. I think one of them might have been a check down. The other one was when Brock was rolling to his right and he found Juice kind of running to the right with him. Are there more opportunities for him to check the ball down to McCaffrey? Probably. But he's not Alex Smith. He's not Captain Checkdown. I don't know if Kyle Shanahan is going to drill into Brock, take the safe thing, take the safe stuff. But at some point, with that umbrella defense being deployed by Seattle, you would think that the throws would have been quicker, would have been checkdowns, would have been easier. And again, 75% completions. Brock doesn't need easy, but would have been pass plays, route concepts that would have taken into account what the Seahawks were giving underneath. That we could say maybe wasn't employed as much. Kyle did throw some, one of them might have been a backwards pass to McCaffrey that he ran, and that one actually might have come back due to a penalty. So there was some sprinkled in, but I think moving forward, if Brock plays a little captain check down just to get to a 2nd and 5, versus trying to push something downfield, especially if teams are going to play the Niners the way Seattle did and challenge the receivers, take what the defense gives you. There's no shame in that at all. The running game. So they went over 100 yards, right? 27 rushes for 131 yards and a touchdown. Good, but not great. And obviously they weren't going to get to 228 or whatever the heck they had when they played in Seattle, courtesy of Isaac Guerendo's, 74-yard run. So they were close to where they were minus that run against Seattle today. But a lot of runs by McCaffrey, they didn't go anywhere. 2 touches for Mason, ran it twice for 13 yards, wasn't seen again. And that was early. I think it might have been the first quarter. and they didn't see Mason again. Newsflash for everybody right now, Jordan Mason is the 49ers' best running back. He is a stronger runner than McCaffrey. He is more explosive than McCaffrey. McCaffrey's got the better vision. He's shiftier. McCaffrey's the better player, obviously. And the running game did go for over 130. Granted, Brock had 40 yards or around 40, whatever he wound up getting. I would like to see some 2 running back sets. I would like to see Mason in there more on, if you want to call it obvious air quotes, running downs. How about a 2 running back set where both McCaffrey and Mason are in the backfield? You flex McCaffrey out wide or in the slot, and you still leave Mason in the backfield, shotgun or otherwise, to still give the defense the thought of this could be run or pass, right? Because obviously you don't have an empty backfield. Jordan Mason is still a top 10 running back in the league, although he's touched the ball 3 or 4 times since McCaffrey's return. And it's not mixing Mason in just for the sake of mixing in another running back. He's a strong, effective runner that gives the defense another look, another type of presence, a different kind of physicality. Generally, running 130 for 131 yards is good for the Niners. And they threw it under 30 times. That's good for the Niners. They didn't run it over 30 times. And not to say if they got 3 more rushes out of it, that they would have won the game. They needed to convert on their final drive to take more time off the clock. They did not. And their defense did not get a stop. And pass defense, Geno did ultimately wound up going for over 220 or whatever it was on the day. But they weren't challenging the receivers much. Metcalf and Smith and Jigba had good games. Renardo Green and Lenore and Yadam, I wouldn't say they played poorly. I mean, Yadam had a pick, but that was more Geno's bad throw than anything that Yadam did. And Yadam could have had a breakup on a 3rd and 12 from the 49ers 28-yard line, mid-3rd quarter. The play where Yadam does not drift back enough, leaps, the ball goes over his hands to Metcalf by the sideline, keeps the drive alive, 1st down, and the Seahawks wound up scoring on that drive. Don't leave your feet unless you absolutely need to, and he's got to get deeper. He's got to get deeper. That could have been a turning point in the game if Yadam at least even just knocks it down. He misjudged it. He jumped a little too early. It happens. But that could have been a game-changing type of play for the Niners defense. And I don't put a whole lot of stock in the interception he got because any one of us listening, if we were where Yadam was, would have caught the ball. And I said earlier, guys, pasty, Smith only had 1 incompletion on that last drive. Yeah, he got sacked by Leonard Floyd. Yeah, he ran it in from 12 yards out to win the game. 1 incompletion. Niners playing the same defense throughout the game. And when it matters most, the defense once again does not come up with a stop. I don't know what's going to change at Green Bay, especially if, now let's talk about injuries. Nick Bosa, as you know, and as you're hearing from me, left the game. It wasn't the hip injury or the oblique injury that's been bothering him. It was the other side. And I'm recording this on Sunday night. So we'll know more in the coming days about Bosa's availability. But right now, I would say it does not look promising. And if that's the case, Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley and your defensive staff, what are you going to show Jordan Love next week at Green Bay? A better quarterback than Geno Smith. Similar quarterback. Strong arm, can sling it down the field when given time. They have comparable weapons. And the Packers have a better defense than the Seahawks. Now, Green Bay did not look great today. They got very lucky beating Chicago on a blocked field goal attempt at the end. I don't think Green Bay is any world beater. I'd feel better about this game if it was in San Francisco than in Green Bay. But hopefully there's no inclement weather. I don't know. Are we voting for inclement weather to nullify, Jordan Love, or I don't know how much Brock Purdy will be affected by that. We'll get there. We'll get there in the Thursday podcast. But Bosa, if he's out, what does that pass rush look like? Tatum Bethune at linebacker might have an MCL injury. That's all I read, whether it's a sprain or something, but he left the game. Renardo Green injured his finger. He did return. He should be fine. Juice was evaluated for a concussion. He returned. Jacob Cowing is, I guess, right now in concussion protocol because he was knocked out of the game. So end result and takeaways, guys. The Niners are now last in the NFC West at 5-5. Arizona 6-4. Rams 5-5. Seahawks 5-5. Niners 5-5 because they have the worst division record. They are 1-3 now. The best they can go is 3-3 if later in the season they can beat the Rams and beat Arizona last week of the season. See a lot of doom and gloom on social media. Is the season over? Absolutely not. 7 games left. The season's not over. The West is bad. The West is very average. I shouldn't say bad. There's other divisions that are bad, like the AFC South. This is a very average division. And just looking ahead, listen, Arizona's up by a game on the other 3 teams. Arizona's got to play Seattle twice in the next 3 weeks. Hopefully, Seattle wins one of those, and hopefully it's this game coming up. Arizona's got the Rams again. They beat the Rams once in Arizona. They got to go to Los Angeles. Seattle has to play the Rams again. So Seattle's got Arizona twice and the Rams once more. And the Niners have the Rams at home and at Arizona week 18. A lot of this is going to sort itself out just in an NFC West game. And now, granted, we are still 7 days away from next Sunday. We're all rooting for Seattle now to beat Arizona. So the Niners can stay at worst 1 game back should they drop the Packer game to both Arizona and Seattle. I don't know who the Rams have next week. I should have checked. But rooting for the Seahawks, right? The next time Seattle and Arizona plays, maybe you're rooting for somebody else. You know, Rams playing Seattle, Rams playing Arizona. Like there's the teams, it's going to be a war of attrition in the NFC West, but it doesn't matter if the Niners don't start stringing together wins. The past 2 games, Dallas and Tampa, was their only winning streak of the year. 2. This one would have been big for a lot of reasons, obviously for the NFC West, but this is going to sort itself out, although Arizona does have a very favorable schedule moving forward. They have Seattle twice. They have the Rams. They do have the Vikings, but then they have the Patriots. They have Carolina. And Arizona is not some world beater. Yeah, they're 6-4. They're not some team that's just going to roll into any against any game and go, oh, that's an automatic win. Right? They can be upset. There's a lot to go. Now, this is it's not a Super Bowl year for this team unless they get extremely hot, right? And I don't see that. But do we want to throw the rest of the season away saying they can't possibly win the NFC West? They can't possibly get a wild card? No. 7 games to go. What it does mean to me, though, now Green Bay is a must-win game. Now, if they lose that, the season is still not over, but it's a must-win game from this standpoint. I'm going to talk about this more on Thursday. If San Francisco doesn't win the West, but they wind up with the second best record in the division, they need this head-to-head win against Green Bay because you figure the wild cards are going to be Minnesota and Philly or Washington, whoever does not win the East. So the third wild card team is either going to be Green Bay or whoever doesn't win the West. And San Francisco already lost to Minnesota. So Minnesota, and plus Minnesota's 3 games better than San Francisco. They're not going to catch them. A Green Bay loss to Chicago would have helped because they would have been 6-4 versus 7-3. But you take what you can get at this point. Losing to Green Bay drops the Niners to 5-6. And would then be essentially 3 full games behind the Packers for a wild card spot. That is a tough hill to climb. But theoretically, at 5-5, it would have been so great to be 6-4 going into these next 2 games. But theoretically, at 5-5, say they drop the next 2. 5-6, they're going to be calling for Shanahan's head. 5-7, people are going to be wanting to, demolish Levi Stadium. Say they're 5-7, but then they're going home for the Rams and the Bears. That's 2 winnable games. Now they're 7-7 with 3 to go. And you'd have to either win all 3 at Miami, at home for Detroit. And Detroit might have things wrapped up by then. You don't know the way they're going. And at Arizona. 10-7 very well might win the West. 9-8 could maybe, again, war of attrition. And I am not a glass half empty type, glass half full type of person. I'm a glass half empty type of person. I am not an apologist. I am not a homer. I am not even trying to search for ways to be optimistic about the season and say that it's not over for San Francisco. I'm just sharing the math. You're in it until you're not. I'm not, even the Giants, the Jets, the Panthers, the Patriots. These are teams that have not yet been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. You feel worse about those teams than you do about San Francisco. And I know as a Niner fan, we all have this right to playoffs, right to championships, especially what they've done since 2019 outside of the 2020 COVID year. Just felt like another, maybe 12-5, 11-6 type of year. Win the West. Nobody saw Arizona coming, right? No one saw Arizona winning 6 games all year, let alone 6 in their first 10. But everything else has been probably right around where we thought it was going to be in the West. Rams, average team. Seattle, average team. Detroit going to be very good. Minnesota, surprising. Green Bay, somewhat good. And Washington, very surprising. I figured the Eagles were going to win that division anyway because they just have too much talent. But they're in until they're out with 7 games to go. They are making it a lot harder on themselves than they need to be, dropping 3 games in the West that they should have won. And if you want to be a bit conservative about it, they should have won 2 of those 3. And 7-3 would feel a whole lot better. Hell, 6-4 with if today wound up being a win, would have felt a whole lot better when you look back and say, geez, all the injuries, not having McCaffrey for half the season, losing, Ward for a couple games due to a tragedy. Hargrave, Hufanga, Greenlaw still, Ayuk for the season, Kittle for this game. I mean, the Niners have been dealing a lot. I am not making excuses because they still have too much talent on this team to struggle the way that they are. And whether people are going to say if Shanahan's offense has been found out, people can control Shanahan's offense more, or Brock isn't worth, whatever he's going to get. And he's going to get whatever he's going to get. 50 plus million. Everyone just has to be okay with that at this point. This is a week-to-week league, a month-to-month league, and a year-to-year league. Whatever you did last year doesn't matter at all. And no matter how good the teams look on paper, how strong the Niners roster looks on paper, how favorable the matchup looks on paper for San Francisco, this is the type of season for them that nothing is going to come easy. Their backs are against the wall going to Green Bay this week. Usually they come out fighting. I don't see them laying an egg. I don't see them getting run out of Lambeau by the Packers because I'm just not that impressed with the Packers either. But 2 road games, Green Bay and Buffalo, you got to hope for a split. You can't lose both. You can't lose both. You don't want to lose both. And I don't think they're going to win both. You got to pick one. It's got to be the NFC game. It's got to be the Green Bay game. It's got to be the head-to-head against the Packers for down the road if the Niners are still within striking distance of the West or the final wild card. But we will get there and we will preview that game on Thursday, in addition to anything new in Ninerland, injury updates on Bosa and other players. We'll see if someone like a Feliciano is going to make his return. It would be to the bench, though, in terms as a first backup to center and both guard positions. And we'll see what's happening with Dre Greenlaw. And the Packers, Jair Alexander at corner suffered a knee injury. It winds up not being something that's super serious, but let's at least hope it's serious enough that he doesn't play next Sunday against San Francisco. So that concludes the podcast for today. Tough game. Another game that the Niners are going to kick themselves later on, whether they make the playoffs, whether they win the division or not, because it all is going to come down to seeding. And if they miss the playoffs altogether, it could have been a what could have been type of year, because the injury excuse is only going to go so far when you're losing games to teams that you are better than and teams that you had leads against. But whatever you are doing between now and when we speak again, everyone stay happy, healthy, and safe, and we will talk soon. Take care.